and welcome to Connections, listeners. It's our Friday morning call-in program here on KGNU. I'm your host, Hannah Lee Myers, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be back on the show. I'm here to bring you a special Connections program this morning as part of our Flows radio series that you've been hearing on KGNU over the last few months. Before we get started with our Flows guests, today we should let you know that you can find the entire Flows radio series on news.kgnu.org, and this program is brought to you as part of a grant from Boulder County. On today's show, we're going to hear about Flows and the diverse set of work they do to illuminate the connection between sustainability and social justice while working with students and partners to reduce climate footprints. We'll hear about the vital leadership role low-income people, people of color, and people with international backgrounds can do to be part of the sustainability movement. They can and should be part of the sustainability movement, and maybe in a way that hasn't been given enough emphasis as it should. We'll hear the stories of climate justice leaders that we have here in the studio this morning, and we'll discuss why hearing those stories are important to fight climate change. You'll certainly be getting some sustainability tips throughout the show, and we're going to save some time at the end of the hour to focus on some helpful sustainability practices from our Flows members. And as this is Connections, after all, we'll be inviting you to call in and join the conversation starting here in just a few minutes. But first, let's set the stage of our conversation and introduce our Flows guests. First, I'm joined here this morning by Michelle Gabriel-Perish. She is Flows founder and Energy and Climate Justice Assistant Director at the University of Colorado Boulder's Environmental Center. Michelle is a former U.S. State Department Bold Food Fellow and a former Center for Progressive Leadership Fellow. She's also a multi-ethnic writer and poet and a teacher of ecological and permaculture design, wife and mother of three. Michelle, thank you for joining us in the studio this morning.
So much.
And we also have Angela Maria Ortiz Roa. Angela was originally a Flows resident technician and is now Flows coordinator. Angela is also a member of the Climate Justice Leaders Program, which we will talk about a little bit more later in the show. She's a language service provider in Spanish, English, and American Sign Language. Angela is experienced as an urban agriculture educator, receiving her permaculture certificate in 2014. In addition, Angela is a hardworking single mother and Colombian native that came to the U.S. in 2001. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio, Angela.
Buenos días.
We are also joined here by Henry Torres, one of the Flows resident technicians who immigrated to the U.S. from Venezuela. Henry is also a superintendent, union iron worker, and musician. Henry, thank you as well for being here.
Thank you, guys.
And last but not least, we have Andrew Q. Jones. Q is a hardworking single father who joined Flows in the summer of 2018 as a Flows resident technician and works at Sunrise of Boulder, a living assistance facility caring for the nutrition of some of the elders in our community. Q is also a board member at Emergency Family Assistance Association. Thank you so much for being here, Q.
Good morning, and thank you.
So to begin the program, we want to tell you a little bit about what Flows is. So to give that, we're going to open that up to our guests here. Tell us about what Flows does.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. The Flows stands for Foundations for Leaders Organizing for Water and Sustainability. We are a partnership between the Environmental Center at CU Boulder and Boulder Housing Partners. So what we do is we team up students from the university and residents from affordable housing, and we work together by entering the homes of other affordable housing units, and we provide free water and energy upgrades. During the visit, we do a basic audit. We check basic, water and energy consumption, and we speak to the residents about potential areas where the resident could increase their efficiency, and also we learn from the residents about what their sustainability practices are. Another aspect of our program that is very interesting is that we provide our technicians with education. We give green skills training to our technicians so that we can be more equipped to help our community transition as we need greener, better practices.
I know that another element that Flows is involved with is policy, which is, I know we had the honor of accompanying you to a city council meeting not all that long ago. If you could tell us a little bit about the policy action that Flows does as well.
It started when the city of Boulder was working on their climate action plan, and we were working with them apart from flows at first, and we helped them realize that they didn't have anything about equity or really deep community engagement in that planning process. And so they amazingly turned to us and said, okay, well, can you help us with that aspect? And had us host a World Cafe. And so we trained Flow's community leaders on how to think through some of our needs in life as policy. And then we trained them in a World Cafe style, which is just hosting fast-paced conversations in their community. And so we had affordable housing residents and other low-income community members come and sort of give input into the climate action plan, but we didn't call it that at the time. We just sort of tried to help people assess what their needs are as community members and what policies might be able to make shifts for that. So that was the beginning of that work. And it was really hard and really exciting. I think we all learned a lot from it. And then from that, I helped found a Just Transition Collaborative. And so the Just Transition Collaborative has also been working on policy work and started a climate justice leaders program to try to train up people more specifically on policy work and policy changes that can be made. And also preparing policymakers to work with underrepresented voices.
And in the program coming up a little bit later, we're going to talk about the importance of that and why be involving marginalized or less represented parts of the community in policy and in sustainability policy and climate change related policy is important. So do stay tuned for that. I want to turn things over to Henry and ask you, we know you are one of the first resident technicians. So if you could tell us a little bit about I know there are workshops as well that I've seen you at, some of the workshops that you've been to over the years that are Flow's workshops and what you've learned in those multi-hour workshops that you go to as part of the program.
Yeah, we've been in a couple of those, probably few, more than two. But my favorite one, I think, has to be the harvesting water through the rain barrels, and that was a fun, like hands-on. We went through the community. We taught the community how to install them. I learned how to install them also. It was really fun. There was a lot of people, and they follow us around. We had tools. We talked. We laughed. We had I can't remember his name, but he's also a permaculture.
Avery Ellis.
Yes, correct. And he taught us the community, and it was a great day. And we ended up having a potluck, and it was really good. It was really good. And another one that I really liked was the solar panel. So we went and learned how to install solar panels, and we had a class more detail about how solar panels work, which is pretty interesting because you can, you drive around, you see them up there, but you don't really know exactly how is the process and to how the sun is harvesting or harvest into to become energy for us. And I would love to do it again. It's something that is pretty interesting to me. We had a couple more like composting and recycling and how to fix your bike workshops. So it's an ongoing process of learning, and I like to learn. So any time there's workshops, my hands up and I like to participate.
And Q, of the things we've talked about, so there's the home visits, there's the workshops, there's some of the policy stuff. What's your favorite as far as being part of the group? Is there a certain element that, as you've been involved, has really spoken to you of why be involved with the group, why participate and spend the time?
Well, for me, most things in my life have been like dropped on me out of the blue. I didn't see them coming, and I like it that way. I was given this family of like-minded people who want to see change, want to affect change, and then all these tools to do so. And then at the same time, by going out and meeting the residents in your community, I've been affected in a familiar way where, I've been invited in for meals. I've been given gifts. I've been, part of a bigger picture that in the end, I know when we go in and we change things in people's homes, we spend hours sometimes, one visit can last you an hour, maybe 2 hours, and that's time that you don't feel that's wasted. That's time that you feel like you've done something effective for the world, and the people know, and they feel that, and they reciprocate. And for me, that's the best. That's the thing that when I go and I'm with Henry or I'm with Angela, and we go into a home, these people don't know us, but they welcome us, and then what we give them, they reciprocate in that love way, in that thank you way, and that's the best. That's the part.
And the learning as well, from what I've heard from Flows members, goes both ways. That it's something that, even though Flows is very much oriented as educating students, educating members, and the community that you guys speak with, that there's a lot of knowledge that comes back as well. If someone could tell me a little bit about some of those qualities that you're seeing, some of the times that maybe you've gone into a home or even had a member that came in that you had a class that you taught, and there was so much knowledge that came back that might be from where they grew up, how they grew up.
Definitely. So just to clarify for the audience, I think it's very important to understand that Flows is a program that focuses on the positive, right? So I feel like as communities of color, as immigrants, as low-income people in this really expensive city, I feel sometimes we're looked as a drain, like, to the system, because we're receiving support from different safety nets that the city provides. So our approach to our interactions with the residents is more on the asset-based. So we are seeing this residents eye to eye, being able to communicate from resident to resident. It's very empowering to the resident and obviously for us. But the fact that we go in with open hearts, open minds, open ears to hear their stories and bring value to them and highlight the work that they're already doing instead of walking in and telling them what they're not doing, I feel it really provides an environment that encourages really healthy conversation, like he was saying, and just a two-way conversation of an exchange of knowledge. So I feel like some of the stuff that we are hearing when we go into people's homes is just that people are already doing a lot. I feel like sometimes you think that maybe people, because of their maybe lack of academic education, they lack this knowledge. But in reality, I feel like we have lived experiences, and we found that because of our financial needs, we're very careful on how we consume resources. We're very thoughtful in the way that we raise our children to consume resources. So it's very powerful to go into people's homes and thinking that you are going to be sharing knowledge when you walk out of there and be like, wow, they're already doing everything. If anything, they're like reusing every single tub that they buy at the store. They're drying their clothes in their couches and stairs and doors, and when like most of us are like using our dryers to do it, so it's really like little simple things that people don't understand that are extremely important practices right now. And I feel like that's the magic of Flows, is like highlighting the work that people are doing and empowering them in the leadership they already have.
Yeah, and I can think of a couple of stories, too, where we have really learned something specifically or have walked away really surprised and energized. Henry was talking about the rain barrel training, and I remember there was a family there that the kids were really interested and involved, but the mom was sort of distant. And I asked if she wanted a rain barrel, and she said no, and we just hung out and talked for a little bit. And then it turned out at the end that she's from South Sudan, and the rain barrels that we had were so little that she didn't see what she could possibly do with them, and that she was used to rain barrels that were probably 15 times larger than what we were providing. So it actually turned out that she wasn't not interested because she's not interested in rainwater harvesting. She was not interested because she thought maybe because she's in affordable housing, she's getting this pitsy little rain barrel, and she wanted something more substantial. And so, I was asking her, well, what do you do with your rain barrel? And she's like, oh, everything. We wash dishes, we wash clothes, and then they kept goats, so they give water to the goats. And so I was telling her she should present in front of city council, and she could win a sustainability award for living so sustainably for so long. So that was one example. Another time we were donated dual flush and smart toilets from Kohler. And so we were installing those, and one of the households that we were installing them in was from Mexico, and I really wanted to make sure to gather the family and explain the like two flush system, and I was like, because it's silly to install something and then people don't know how to use it, and maybe it doesn't even end up being more efficient. So I started gathering people, and they were like, yeah, we know how to use this thing. And actually, we have been so concerned that since we moved to the United States from Mexico, that we're like forced to waste so much water. And so they were kind of like, we've been waiting for this toilet, and where is it? And then even as we dug deeper, they sort of showed us that we need to think in more radical change, because they're like, this is great that it's more efficient toilet and we're using a little bit less water, but why are we still defecating into fresh water? So I feel like it was this great moment where we were like, yeah, they already get it, and they are just waiting for the infrastructure to catch up with what they already know. Mm-hmm. So that's not usually how we think of Mexico, right? But I think there's some really amazing lessons in there for us.
And we want to remind our listeners that we are speaking with Flow's members, and we do want to invite you now to call in and join the conversation if you'd like. We'd love your questions, comments, feedback. The number to call is 303-442-4242. Again, that's 303-442-4242. So another question that I wanted to ask you is, why students? What the involvement of students in the program? Is there some element there that is particularly special and fits with Flow's mission? If you could tell us a little bit about the student element and how that fits into everything that you do.
So we're based out of the Environmental Center at CU Boulder. So we're actually housed out of the university. So the program is enriching for students, and really what we thought was we want to not just provide something where students are giving services to a community and then feeling like they've really done something, but to partner with the community, and that is a more transformational process. And students learn from getting to engage with people who are living their lives. And So really, it's almost the other way around. Like this could have been intended just for students, and the original funding was, out of the university. But we didn't want to just go into communities and provide services and leave. And at the end of the day, only students have learned about energy, water, and climate justice. We wanted this to be a community thing. So. Yeah.
I'll just like to add that I think another important aspect of having the students there is they work as a bridge. I feel like we have communities here that even though we have a huge university, they're not familiar with it at all. They feel like they don't belong. They feel like there's not a space for them to learn there. So to have students coming into the homes, it creates a closer relationship between the institution and the communities, and also it works the other way around. I feel like we have a lot of students in the university that have no idea that we have low-income communities that struggle to remain in place here. So I feel like it works both ways, so we're educating each other of the existence of each other. So I think it's very powerful to have that bridge between both worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd imagine having students and also there's something that the kind of like youthful excitement around climate work and climate change probably brings to the table as well, and having that engage with all different age groups in the homes that you're going into. Is that something
Absolutely.
that you see also? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And this generation is committed to climate action. It's really amazing to see, and even just working at the Environmental Center for 5 or 6 years, I've seen that increase from 92% of students really caring about climate to now we're at about 97% of students. So this generation, they know climate change is happening, they know this is real, they want to take action, they don't always know how. And then also with the Flow students, we are working with a really diverse group of students, so I think it provides an opportunity for a lot of them that do feel isolated, like Angela was talking about, maybe at CU, to go back to communities that look a little bit more like where they're from, and they actually feel at home. So we've had a couple of Flow students say, being a part of Flows is when I felt most at home in all of my time at CU. So that's really powerful as well.
And following up on that, one thing that I know is emphasized within Flows is the importance of those members' stories and the importance of the environmental leaders' stories that might not be as mainstream when you look at environmental conservation, and the sustainability movement, I think it's fair to say that if you follow that kind of coverage and you look at protest footage or who are the talking heads on major national television, you will see a lot of white people. You will see a lot of wealthy people that are involved, and researchers and some of that. You're just not seeing the diversity amongst the stories of who's involved and who's leading the environmental movement and who's making these discoveries that are truly can have an impact on combating climate change. So if we want to go into telling some of the stories that might kind of emphasize that, and in the process, if we could kind of speak about why telling those stories is important and the emphasis that you put on that as a group. So, Henry, one of those stories that I know we heard from you was how you talking about how parents and grandparents impact how you saw things like growing food and if you could tell us a little bit about that and how that prepares, how maybe an international experience of how things are kind of coming here, realizing that setting you up as an eco leader. Tell us a little bit about your story there.
Yeah, I think it comes like unconsciously as you grow up in a different setting, and where like we just talked about, like Michelle was saying that. In other countries, we do it naturally. We don't just like think about. Actually, I'm gonna rephrase it. As a kid, I really didn't think about it, but my grandpa was always going like, "You need to take shorter showers. You need to, close the doors because you're gonna let the cold in," and all these little things that was repeatedly implanted in my head. I saw my grandma outside always with the tomatoes and the strawberries and the things like that, and it just creates that little bug in your head that when you actually grow up and become who you are, it comes out to you, and you're gonna repeat it to your kids. And they don't know it yet, but it will come back to them later on and say, "Oh yeah, my dad was a pain, but the pain has become change, and it's a positive change for the world." So yeah, influences like that all the time. And like for more than I love my grandpa, and I thought he was actually the most painful man in the world. Now I feel like he was just a leader, and I just didn't know it. Mm-hmm. And it just become like that for sure.
And Q, I have a question for you on this one. One of the things that I hear talked about a lot of flows is that these environmental leaders, people that are truly doing great things that impact the fight against climate change, might not realize that what they're doing, it actually makes them an environmental leader. And we talked about some of that just being what you were taught, but some of it also the frugality element. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how people that might not think of themselves as being environmental leaders because they're just doing something because it saves money, just kind of that connection there of like getting people to see how important that is, getting people to see that regardless of why you're doing it, that still means that you have a place in the sustainability movement. In your home visits and such, have you seen that kind of epiphany in people?
Well, like Henry said, most people are already actively doing much more than anyone would even give them credit for or recognize. But the things that I'm old, so back in the day, for me, when I say that, we used to Michelle may make dinner, but 4 or 5 little kids in the neighborhood are over her house eating, but they all have parents who all, could have fed them. But we used to all kind of do the community thing naturally, and we got away from that. But what I found in this flows thing, that when you're on a certain level, or well, I hate to put it as levels, but when we're in this little box of need, where the community or the society views you as the needy and the drain, as Angela said, then when you are invited into that environment of other people who feel that same pain, it's like a force that can easily open up into, okay, now I have 1 can of beans, she has 1 loaf of bread, and now we have a meal for for families. And so we need to think more towards that type of thing in people's minds when you come into their homes with changes that could also help them save money in the future, better their lives, help the world. You can see it in their spirit where the change is effective, not just in the pocket. And the spirit, I think, is the beginning of where we can make the changes that are necessary going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we want to invite callers if they'd like to join this conversation. If you have your own stories of things maybe that you learned as a kid that you might not have thought were environmentally friendly and maybe you were doing it for another reason, or maybe you have some sort of experience of sustainability practices that you don't see being practiced in general but might have been commonplace when you were growing up and want to share those, we very much invite you to call in and join the conversation in any capacity, questions, comments. The number to call is 303-442-4242. Again, that's 303-442-4242. And you are listening to Connections, and we are here with FLOWS members. So I wanted to also point out that FLOWS is, if people want to get involved or have interest, where they can do that, and a little bit about, I know FLOWS is also accepting applications, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We're looking for more community members that are in the low and moderate income bracket. We would love to have people apply at the CU website. If you just type in your Google search bar FLOWS CU, we will come up immediately. And if you just take the time to maybe read a little bit more about us in our short little website description, at the bottom you'll see the applications, and it just leads you directly to the application form. And as I'm mentioning this, I would like to highlight that FLOWS is unique in the sense that we are looking for residents to give us their time, but there is a stipend for people's commitment to our program. So that is very unique because we know that we're working with people that most of us in survival mode. So most of us have more than one job. We have children. Some of us are raising our children on our own. So, giving away your little time that you have available to a program like this it's a lot of work, and we recognize that, and we want to compensate people for that commitment that they're putting into this community and our planet at large. So we have stipends. So after participating in the training and a couple of home visits, you will receive a Visa gift card that you are to use in whatever way you need to. So some of us go take our kids for ice cream, some of us pay bills, some of us buy groceries. So whatever it is that's needed for, it's there for you if you participate in FLOWS.
And we also I want to go back a little bit to the stories bit. I know we have the studio maxed out here with all microphones used, but there's many FLOWS members. That's a good question. How many FLOWS members do you think at this point?
I think at this time, we just had a few of our students graduate, which is always a really sad moment for us. I think we have probably around 6 to 8 people right now. Our residents, that's another thing I think to mention for anybody considering joining our program, is that our program is really flexible. So we have people that come whenever they have the time available. So that's why I'm giving you that number between 7 to 8 to 10, because it just moves depending on the people's availability and what's going on in life. So
but
we
in
have
general we have like 14.
Yes,
Usually we have like 7
when
or
we're
8
full
students
force,
and 7 or 8 community members.
Correct. And we do have half students have residents. Yes.
So we're just in the process of hiring students as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is 9:00, so we want to let our listeners know that you are listening to KGNU Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. And we are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with you. Stay tuned. And this is Connections, your weekly Friday call-in show here on KGNU. We are speaking with FLOWS team members, and in a little bit, we're going to be talking about the link between social and environmental justice and going a little bit more into some sustainability practice tips for you. But before we do that, we want to talk a little bit more about some of the FLOWS member stories and how much those individuals' backgrounds bring to the table, and how some of those stories might not be the types of stories you're hearing when you're talking about people people that are leading the sustainability movement in the mainstream. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I think, Michelle, you were saying that there were some other stories that are worth telling to kind of demonstrate this point of how unique backgrounds that might not be the mainstream backgrounds that you're seeing in eco leaders on the mainstream news might have more to give than people realize that they do to the combating climate change.
Sure. I know for me, when I was growing up, I was raised like Henry, where it was like every time you turned around, it was like, turn the light off, turn the water off, close the door, close the refrigerator door. And I remember maybe it was high school or college, but people saying, you should conserve water and turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth. And I was like, why would you have the water on when you're brushing your teeth? And so it turned into this whole thing where the teacher had to explain to me that some people leave the water on while they brush their teeth and aren't using the water. And so, there's even ways where sometimes our sustainability tips that we think are just general sustainability tips don't even make sense. And I still actually don't understand why you would just leave the water on. Same thing with washing the dishes. I think some people turn the water on, just leave the water on while they're washing dishes. But I don't see why you would turn the water on, rinse a little bit, turn the water off, and turn it back on again. So that's one way. And then I really liked what Q was saying about living more communally. And we have one technician, Peter Saint-Jean from Haiti, who we've heard from a little bit, I think, in the Flows series. And I really love hearing people's stories when they're more recent immigrants and things are still really fresh. And, he really talks a lot about looking around and seeing all of these cars with just one person in them and just being shocked and being like, how can it be that you have everyone just driving around by themselves in these massive cars, and that in Haiti and where he's from, you would coordinate trips with people and you would say, okay, I'm going here, you're going there, you have to be there at this time. Then, having carpooling, which is like a radical idea here. And yet, we know that transportation accounts for 30% of our emissions. So it's actually, on the one hand, it's like a cute story. On the other hand, this addresses a really huge issue that we have. And the transportation system that we have set up and all of us being used to doing everything so on our own is causing some of the climate issues that we see. So some of these perspectives, it's fun stories and they're powerful ideas for change.
And I wanted to also talk about, maybe tell some of the stories. I know one of the workshops that we highlighted was talking about people who had won awards internationally for leading the sustainability movement, but there might be names that we'd never heard. If you could, maybe we could bring some of those into our listeners' consciousness if they're don't know already. Anybody come to mind?
Yeah, we were looking at the Goldman Prize winners, which is this amazing international prize for work on the environment. Some of the more famous people who have won the award include Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was a Nigerian man who stood up to Shell Oil that was running sort of a quasi-government out of Nigeria and was really violent and brutal and had ruined the Niger River Delta, which was one of the most beautiful places on the earth and is sort of analogous to maybe the Amazon River Delta, but most of us in the U.S. have never heard of it and aren't used to thinking of Africa as beautiful as it is and was. And he was assassinated. But he had been a prize winner. His son accepted the prize for him. We looked at Nora Padilla from Colombia, who's a recycler. And maybe I'll let Angela tell that story if she wants, because I know that you really liked her story and wanted us to use it in the training.
Right. So I grew up in Bogota, and I moved here when I was 18 years old, and I just remember my entire childhood, just the sounds in the streets. And, when you are at home, you can hear the recyclers coming because they'll scream botella papel, right? So like botella is a bottle, papel is paper. So they start screaming that. So you know that this individual is coming, pulling a cart. And I have images with like the dog and just the cart of like that they build themselves full of glass and paper and cardboards. And Nora Padilla is one of those recyclers in Bogota. And she has just been organizing a lot of the people that provide those services to the city, because they realize the importance of the work, and just kind of demanding, kind of unionizing and demanding a better treatment, because unfortunately these people that live in the street and do this kind of work are viewed as, they call it desechables, like people that you can... Disposables. That's kind of the name that they use in Bogota for some of these people. Of course, there's this whole movement that now is trying to remove those words out of our everyday vocabulary. But I grew up that way, and I remember watching that video and her being recognized for her work, and it just really just excited me to see that we're giving the credit to the people that deserve it. Because in my childhood, I know my mom was very, very thoughtful in the way that she taught us how to dispose of things. Like, so in Colombia, for example, if we had leftover food, we will pack it in a plastic bag and then pack it in a double plastic bag, which was probably not the best thing then, but we were just trying to protect the food that was going to go in the trash, because we knew that somebody was going to be looking into the trash for food. So my mom wanted people to find it clean. Another thing that my mom, I remember doing, is because the recyclers will stick their hands in their trash. I remember if there was broken glass, like, we were very careful to pack it so that person wouldn't hurt themselves. So Nora Padilla was a very powerful story, and it resonated really deeply with me because it was a reality I grew up in. So I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also what's amazing about her story is that, she received death threats. And so part of what we were looking at in that training is how, a lot of people of color here and around the world aren't really recognized for work on sustainability, even though often our lives are on the line when we do this type of work. And she was threatened, and there were multinational corporations that wanted to come in and take over the recycling market in Colombia, right? So it's one of those things where it's like a multinational corporation knows they can make a lot of money, but individual people are seen as disposable. So her story was really powerful. Another story that we looked at was Franny or Francie. I'm going to have to remember her name. But another Colombiana woman, and actually she's a palenquera. So in Colombia, we have these communities that are freed. Essentially, sometimes boats of Africans would come to the Americas, and the Africans would get off the boat and be like, we're not putting up with any of this. And so they would escape and start their own communities. And some of those communities and towns are still alive and doing what they have done, since the 1600s. So that in and of itself to me is actually really inspirational, and to know that there are a lot of Africans, and in Colombia especially, we're famous for having a lot of Africans that were never enslaved. They were just brought over, but they've always been free. And some of them also have community with the indigenous people. So she was a palenquera, and her community does really low-tech mining in the area, and that's sort of how they stay economically viable. And an international company, again, wanted to come in and start mining in her community. And she was able to get some sort of resolution passed, so they weren't legally allowed to do it, and the company kept coming anyway and bringing these giant machines that they were going to mine with and just run over this community. And so she went to law school, and she was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to solve this problem for my community. The community marched, what was it? I think like 40 miles to the capital, by foot, where the whole community just got up and marched to the Capitol, and they were able to kick out the mining company. So stories like that are really inspirational, and also that help us see where sometimes we blur the line of, was she doing this for the environment? For sure. Was she doing this for her culture? For sure. Was this a matter of survival? Definitely. So I think that's also where, I think usually people think that sustainability leaders are leaders who do this because of enlightenment or some kindness of their heart. And for a lot of our communities, we're doing this because it is a matter of cultural survival.
And I think,
sorry, I just would like to add also, just all those unnamed indigenous leaders that are being murdered all the time, and, happening in Brazil, happening in Colombia, happening everywhere. So I feel like there's just honor to them, even though we don't know their names and we cannot name them right now.
And we do want to let our listeners know that you can call in and join this conversation. The number to call is 303-442-4242. That's 303-442-4242. Before we move on to the next section of our discussion and that link that we've kind of been hitting on here throughout about the link between social and environmental justice, I wanted to open things up to Q and Henry. If there's anything that you've heard here that you've been wanting to chime in on, we want to give you that option. Henry, have at it.
Well, this is more like a selfish thing because I like the flows a lot. It's because we usually are surrounded by people like with my own likes or what we do. We surround ourselves with people that we can connecting. But when you go to these houses, you connect with people of all sorts. And I really, really find it interesting of how other people live and what other people do. Not necessarily, I'm not even talking about sustainability in this point. I'm talking about people in general, and like their soul, like how they do. And that's my favorite part of flows. I've learned so much from other people. Like you said, stories when they were little, stories... Because some people, they will open up to you and they'll tell you their whole life. And you sit there and you listen, and that's amazing. That's beautiful. I have so many stories, and it's hard for me sometimes to leave, Like I know I got to go, keep going. And I particularly remember one, this man will build speakers. So he'll buy speakers from the thrift store and refurnish them, but amazingly beautiful. And he would just stay in his house. He was like a hermit, right? And he would stay in his house, and he didn't have that much contact with people. So when we went in, and he figured out that I was settled, and I was okay, and he was okay, he just rampant, and he told me all about every single speaker that he built. And it was amazing work with his hands. And his shop was in his house. So that will always stay for me. That will always stay in my mind. How you can judge people out there, but then you go in their houses and it's I don't know. You can see more than just the shell. You can see their soul. You can see how their eyes shine when they have connection with somebody. And that's important to me.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would imagine that somebody like that is refurbishing things and is working on something like that because it is their passion and their love might be surprised when that's kind of reframed to them as that kind of work is tied in with environmental and sustainability work.
Correct.
Correct. I mean, is that something that you'd imagine he would have been shocked to have maybe been like, oh, you're an eco-leader because you're fixing things that were in the thrift store and might have gotten thrown away if people thought that they were old.
Yes, correct. It was amazing, yeah. And he just actually told me, you know what, you can take these speakers and I'll always sell them for the cost. I don't even make any money here. So it was just like the work they put into, and they don't want it back. They don't want money back. They just want to do the work and then just spread it out. And that's amazing.
Yeah, valuable role in the movement.
Yeah, we have this saying here where it's reduce, reuse, recycle, but really there's so many more steps that you can take in between that, and we have reduce, reuse, refurbish, repair, reimagine, and then recycle. And for so many people around the world, the idea that something breaks and you just throw it away is just unimaginable. You fix it or you figure out what else you can do with it before you toss it out. And again, that's sustainability leadership. That is design thinking.
And Q, anything you'd like to add from what we're chatting about?
Well, I've had only great experiences with flows, but one of my favorite weekends, I remember we went to a property, and frequently we'll go to a property and we're not able to finish all the units, so we'll have to return on the next day. Maybe we'll start on Saturday and then we have to go back Sunday. Well, this particular property, I can't remember the name of it, but we went to the property and we did our rounds. We did several units and it was a good day. And I remember going into this one unit, and it was a Latina family, and the mother, I just remember the way she made me feel like like I was like her son. She just kind of made me feel that. And that was on the first day. And so the next day we went back and we were doing the rounds, and all of a sudden we hear this shouting in Spanish, and we turned around and she was up on the balcony motioning us to come. So we went there, and the reward for that, we were fed this delicious bowl of pozole, which I'd never had anything quite so delicious or been treated in that manner. And she literally made us sit down and eat a full bowl of pozole, and then offered us more. And we had, obviously we had to go to do other things, but that type of thing does not happen in my life on a regular. So in that, I was there to do something good, but just being there, I was rewarded. So, when you say a story, you want to have where you went to give something, but in the end, everybody gained. And that's the most powerful thing for me. And that was the most delicious meal I ever had, I think. Yeah.
Actually, I left with a mole. She gave me some mole to take home. It was awesome.
So again, there's another reason to join Flows, right?
Yeah.
Eat good.
And we have fun. That's a lot. We laugh a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
So we've been, again, inviting callers to call in 303-442-42 if you'd like to join this conversation. But throughout this conversation, we've been talking about all sorts of stuff that connects to this central part of Flows' mission, which is that link between social and environmental justice. So if we could hear from you, I think that that's something that people hearing that might not know right away what that link is. How is a focus on social justice related to the environmental movement and the issues that we're seeing around climate. And if you could tell us a little bit about how some of these things like community and that kind of element too, all fitting in with this link between, and how that, even though things we're talking about here, whether it be what you guys get back from the community when you're going to give knowledge, but also kind of this mission, how this all links together under that link between social and environmental justice.
Sure. I love talking about this subject, actually. So, one of the things that I love about, there are 17 environmental justice principles that people can go and look up right now. And part of what I love about them is that they talk about fair and meaningful engagement of people in decision-making processes. And so, even though we're talking about the environment, a lot of what happens for our communities is that the environment is tied up with power. And the environment is tied up and almost something that you can use to see who has power and privilege and who does not. And so, Majora Carter has a definition of environmental justice that's basically that environmental justice is the idea that no one should have to bear more of a burden environmentally and not see as many benefits environmentally. But right now, race and class are really good indicators of where you're going to find bad stuff, like incinerators and dump sites and transportation hubs, and indicators of where you're going to find good stuff, like parks and wildlife. So, it's something that, if you want to trace racism in the United States, you actually can look at a map of where our waste goes, and you'll have a good sense of where people of color live in the country. So, some of that is really traumatic. On the other hand, at the same time, we have so much of a legacy of knowing how to live with Earth. We have such a legacy of, inherent ecological design. I am sometimes part of the permaculture community and help teach classes sometimes on permaculture. And, I always teach that basically permaculture is a Western mind's response to trying to systematize indigenous knowledge and trying to see, what people were just naturally doing of sprinkling leftover water outside and harvesting water in natural ways. Permaculture is a systematization of that so that it makes more sense to sort of the disconnected, I guess you would say, Western or U.S. and European mind. So I think those are some of the connections. And then really what we've been trying to do with Flows and at the university as well with my job as Energy and Climate Justice Manager. No, I'm Assistant Director for Energy and Climate Justice now. Not used to saying it yet. is really to help make the connections that you can't really name any ecological issue that does not have a social component. And, Wendell Berry is famous for saying eating is an agricultural act, right? And that like pulls us all in to recognize we are actually all part of agriculture, whether or not we are farming. And we live on a planet, so everything we do is an ecological act. And, so I'm just extrapolating based on what he said. And we're also social animals. So everything we do is also a social act or a political act. So we're just trying to mesh all of that together and tease it all apart so that people have a good sense of, when we're talking about recycling, yes, it's good for the earth. And also, we're talking about eliminating some of our waste streams that are going to the most disempowered people in our community. And how do you know they're disempowered? In part because you're seeing waste streams come to their community. So trying to change that cycle a little bit. So yes, on the one hand, we're doing these things because they're ecologically sane. And on the other hand, we're doing them because we have a social responsibility. And none of us want to be a part of oppressing people through our waste.
Any other thoughts on that?
I have something too. Just at the everyday flows experience connection between the environment and the social aspect, I feel like through the dialogue that we're having around sustainability, we are allowed to connect, and we are like in a safe space to reconnect with each other. So I feel like for me to be able to, as an immigrant, that I've struggled so much to grow roots here, to go into another person's home who recently migrated, to be able to connect and maybe rescue some of those aspects of who we are that are pushed aside when we move here. I feel like we're creating that social connection, and it's through the platform of sustainability dialogue. So that's maybe not the bigger picture, but just like an everyday exchange and connection and intersection between the social and the environment. I feel like Michelle said, I feel like we come and we have this still like this like palpitando, how do you say that? Pulsating connection with nature, and we're able to connect with each other just by having those social spaces. So yeah, that will be my thought.
And I wanted to real quick bring up, we did receive a question or a comment here from a caller, but over email. So I guess an emailer here. The comment is, when I owned my own home, I was much more conscious about conserving resources because I was paying all the bills. Now living in an apartment complex, I find that my habits of conserving water, composting, and recycling are slipping. So wanted to put that to the Flows members. Any thoughts on that as well, doing the work that you do?
Yeah, so traditionally that's called the split incentive, which is something that's really difficult that people deal with. I actually am also a renter, and I live in a place with an HOA. So I have like a split incentive twice removed or something, where not only do I not see the water bill and I don't know how much water my family uses, it doesn't even go to my landlord. So my landlord also doesn't know unless he's looking at the HOA paperwork, and the HOA knows how much water each unit uses, but not necessarily each owner. So this split incentive means that sometimes we're asking people to conserve when they aren't going to be the ones who see the economic benefit, so if your landlord is the one paying the utilities, then you don't even notice what the utilities are. And at the same time, for us, especially working in Boulder Housing Partners properties right now, every little bit that we lower their overhead is savings that goes back into the community. And that's kind of what's amazing about having a housing developer and property owner that is not for profit, right? So any savings goes back into the community and helps keeps rent low. But yeah, I think that that's something that people struggle with. And that's why I think that that's maybe a mistake the sustainability movement has sometimes made, of making it about money. Right? And Flows, we're sort of approaching it more from an ethics place and a moral place and a connection place, right? We don't just conserve energy because we're going to save money. That is a great benefit of conserving, but we're actually conserving because we have respect for Earth, and we have respect for each other, and we have respect for people who are mining, processing all of our goods, and then dealing with the wastes of our goods. So for me, it's just a different approach.
I think that what we're doing with Flows is kind of creating a global consciousness too. I feel like it doesn't matter if I see it reflected in my bill directly. you know that somewhere along the line is benefiting you and your community and your planet if you change those habits. So I feel like that's important. I want to give a shout out to Tim Beal from Boulder Housing Partners, who's been unconditional support to Flows and believes in us and support us with every decision that, he's behind us with everything. So I just want to make sure we mentioned him.
Yes. I also want to say that, I think there's a lot of things that people can do in their individual lives, but we've been at the university, we asked students to make pledges around what they want to do around sustainability. And so I took some photos recently of some of the pledges, and I made a series that I just find to be so funny. And it was, I pledged to take shorter showers. I pledged to carpool to events. I pledged to turn the lights off. And then the last one was, I pledged to change the system. Mm-hmm. And so I love that, because there are a lot of things that we can do as individuals. And I think, what this person who emailed in is sort of speaking to is that the systems around us and the way that things are designed are actually designed for waste. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to make individual changes. And I think we do that as much as we possibly can. But that also goes back to some of this policy work. And some of the larger issues that we're dealing with, because we know that climate change is not going to be stopped because we all turn the water off while we're brushing our teeth. That's not enough. Mm-hmm. We are going to have to make some policy changes. We are going to have to design things differently. We're going to have to think through, like that Mexican family reminded us, why are we pooping into fresh water anyway? Isn't there another way to do this? And that's a design question, because as a renter, I actually have very little choice. I have a toilet, it's with fresh water. That's my choice right now. So we need some larger changes to give us more options that we can make as individuals.
And Q, you had a comment you wanted to add as well.
I just want to add to what Michelle's saying, is simply when you join Flows, you're going to find that you're going to change things without even knowing you're changing them. Mm-hmm. Like one of the things that you'll receive from us is a shower timer, which it's a suction cup shower timer. It's literally pretty little blue liquid floating up into it's awesome. But it gives you like a 5 minute 5 minutes, I'm pretty sure, of shower time. So that type of thing. One of the things I found myself doing that I would have never thought of doing before is simply unplugging like chargers, wall sockets, things of that nature, because if you leave those things in, they're still utilizing power. You're paying for that, so you could save on your bill as well as effectively help our planet by unplugging. And so things like that I would have never done. Turning off the TV at night. The TV watches me most nights, so I don't do, I tend not to do that anymore. How I wash my dishes, as Michelle brought up, as I was a water runner, and I'm no longer a water runner. So these type of things that are going to effectively happen to you as being a participant will happen without you even recognizing. You'll just start implementing these things in your life because hey, this stuff works. This stuff is making a difference.
And in our last moment here, I wanted to ask if you could give the information again where people can find out more about Flows. We do want to remind our listeners that we do have a Flows series we've been running here on KGNU, which you'll be hearing more of. We have an upcoming radio documentary on a biochar workshop that you have, as well as I've got to accompany Flows team into a home visit. So we have that coming up as well. You can find that at news.kgnu.org under the tab titled Flows. But where can listeners find out more?
So if you just Google CU Boulder Flows, and you will be directed. Do you know the website?
Or it's Colorado.
Thank you.
It's colorado.edu/e-center/flows.
And we were speaking with Angela Maria Ortiz Roa. She is a Flows coordinator. We also were speaking with Michelle Gabriela Parrish, who is Flow's founder and Energy and Climate Justice Assistant Director at the University of Colorado Boulder's Environmental Center, as well as Henry Torres and Andrew Q. Jones, who are both resident technicians for Flows. Thank you all so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.